Hi, Terry here again. A different setting from usual. My wife and I are visiting her sister in Pennsylvania. So it's only natural I would think about roots. In this case, where Anita comes from, thinking about where I come from, the traditions, the beliefs, the values, the perspectives that we come from decades ago. Those voices, if you will, in our head, different ways. I often say that common sense is taught. Well, I was taught a lot of common sense. Just a sense of the way things are, the way one should behave, the beliefs that we should hold, the boundaries that we protect ourselves by. So I've been thinking about that. And there's a perspective, basic teaching in developmental psychology or developmentalism that says there's a constant process of growth where we differentiate from, we separate ourselves from, and then incorporate. So it's differentiation and incorporation. So traditions, it's good to come from a solid, relatively healthy tradition. But in my mind, growth means expanding beyond that tradition. And sometimes that means differentiation, separating from and saying, how is this different? How am I different from that? But then incorporating the best from. So for me, that means taking those roots that I grew up with, that Dutch Reformed, Christian Reformed perspective, my tradition, and saying, okay, what can I take from that enhances my life, but how do I want to differentiate or move beyond that? The values, perspectives, beliefs, and behaviors that I grew up with, those boundaries that say you don't believe outside of this, you don't behave differently from that, your perspective toward life is this way and not different from that. I recognize that I have expanded beyond most of that. And hopefully I am continuing to learn how to incorporate the best rather than being defiant against or throwing it all away. So for my beliefs, taking that Christian tradition and saying now that I follow Christ in the way of Jesus, which leaves room for following Christ in other ways. And how do I learn from the other ways and incorporate it into my tradition? How do I add my tradition into the lives of others that are following different traditions? Or values. The values that I grew up with in a farming community that was often relatively poor, struggling on small farms and very conventional and provincial. How do I take valuable parts of that and incorporate it into my life that has grown beyond that setting? So beliefs that grow beyond the boundaries of what I was brought up in, and in many respects what I taught and lived into as a pastor. Not throwing it away, but saying those boundaries don't work for me anymore. So we're here, and it's fun to hear Anita talk with her sister Barb about where they come from and the memories that they have and the experiences they shared growing up, but also to hear both of them talk about how they've expanded beyond parts of that, held on to parts of it. So I wonder for you, what parts of your tradition are valuable to you, still make sense in your life, and in what ways have you expanded beyond the boundaries, beyond the limits of that tradition? Growth means, in my mind, expansion. We get that for children. Of course, toddlers expand beyond the infancy, and elementary kids are constantly expanding their knowledge and understanding and their mobility, and certainly as adolescents, they expand because of different changes in their body, changes in their social setting, changes in the way they think, just so many different changes and constantly expanding, or young adults, those that become parents, expanding into that area, expanding into career, expanding into all sorts of areas of influence, and that constant expansion, moving beyond. What have you carried forward? What boundary no longer might serve you well? What values, beliefs, perspectives no longer fit who you are? How have they expanded and morphed and changed? So I hope you find peace with your past so you can incorporate what still continues to make sense to you, what serves you well, but also that you have the freedom to move beyond those boundaries and expand into, or at least explore, other arenas of life. So that's what I'm thinking about this morning and this week as we head back home this afternoon. So, speaking from Pennsylvania. Talk to you next time. Bye.